The esports industry is coming to your community, and it is coming in hot. As a parent, I've been frustrated as I watch my own kids game for hours on end. But as the saying goes, if you cannot beat them, join them. That is exactly what today's guest, Murphy Vandervelde, did. Along with his kids, Murphy created Helix Esports, and together they have built 3 sports centers in New Jersey, New York, and most recently at Patriot Place, Gillette Stadium in Boston. Where this industry is going and how it is leading the gamification of higher education is absolutely fascinating. This conversation will certainly give you a lot to think about as a parent or entrepreneur. Enjoy the podcast. Currently you're the chairman, board member, CEO on multiple esports organizations. What was the path you took to find esports as an industry yourself? Because it certainly wasn't where you started. So what was the path you took, and why are you so fascinated by that industry?
Well, I think I think knowing my past actually will help with how I got here. I grew up in the investment management business. I've learned a couple of different things along the way, but I think Peter Lynch, who is legendary investment manager at Fidelity, who ran the Magellan Fund, used to have a great rule for investing, is that basically own things that you use and, own things that you consume. And when I started looking at what was going around in the world and looking at my kids, my boys specifically, and their friends, what they were doing, how they were spending their time, it was so clear to me that esports and traditional sports like hockey, baseball, soccer, basketball were on this collision course. Not a collision course in terms of some wreckage or violence, but a collision course of becoming intertwined so that the two were really indiscernible, going forward. And I think COVID, interestingly enough, has had a negative impact on parts of the industry, but what it has done is move the growth curve, in my opinion, and in our team's opinion, 3 or 4 years to the left, meaning the growth curve is still there. It just got accelerated because when traditional sports all got canceled, everybody turned to esports, and we're actually pretty good with that. iRacing took place of NASCAR, NBA 2K, not quite the same effect as the NBA, but took the place on, you had ESPN. So we saw this trend, I saw this trend happening with my sons and their friends and my friends' kids, and it was pretty apparent this was a really big wave to be involved in.
That's great. And can you tell us a little bit more about the companies you're involved with today in terms of what they do?
Yeah, so I'm currently the one of the founders and chairman of Helix Esports, which has a couple of different investments. We own 2 of the largest gaming facilities in the U.S. We're about to announce the Helix Esports Academy at the end of, hopefully by the end of this week or early next. We own a couple of different pro league rosters now that we acquired during COVID. We own a data analytics company, and most importantly, kind of our crown jewel is a company called GG Circuit, which owns the software that connects all of these gaming centers across the North America, but actually, globally. So, it's a growing business, and we felt the software was a really important connectivity tool to connect all these gamers together.
So somewhat forming a little bit of a holding company of different esports properties where you see all the different components connecting. Is that a fair?
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. John, we and one word of advice I'll have for anybody out there is really understand where you want to sit in any industry's ecosystem. For us, it was very important where we were, for the first time, as we looked at the investment thesis around what we were doing. Our investment thesis was you had really influential pro team owners like the Krafts, like the Gronkes, like the Wilpons, that were owning teams at the very highest level with no real amateur infrastructure underneath it. And then you had all these gamers in their bedrooms and basements that were looking for a place to compete and learn and socialize. And so we decided that where we felt there was the biggest void in the ecosystem was where we wanted to operate, and that was to create these gaming centers, these LAN centers, if you will, to attract competition, socialization, to build these centers to get players to come and compete in head to head. And so we built the Helix gaming centers. Our first one was in North New Jersey. We just opened one at Gillette Stadium in Foxborough, and we've got a couple other smaller venues opening up in the next couple of weeks.
Murphy, I'm curious, as a young entrepreneur, when you were just starting off, what was your mission at that point? And now as a more mature entrepreneur and having multiple businesses, how has it changed what your mission is?
I think the simple answer for that one is focus. When I was younger and you started investing in different things, it was idea after idea, and it was, you'd try to get in front of a trend or you'd be involved in a trend. But, as I've gotten older, when you're younger, you realize that there's so many different opportunities that, like a kid in the candy store. And if you're creative and entrepreneurial spirit, you can take advantage of a lot of different things. But quite often that, all those things become a distraction, and it's very hard to focus on one thing. So at our core, as an older entrepreneur, getting involved in—
I did say more mature, Murphy.
More mature, as a more mature entrepreneur, it really is about focus. It was, creating the mission statement, creating and understanding where we wanted to fit in the ecosystem, and then just focusing on that part of the ecosystem and not deviating from that, and being really disciplined. And I think that's, and look, as a younger entrepreneur, obviously people can be very, very successful. It's just about discipline and focus. And I think that's one thing I've learned over the years, is how to get more disciplined and more focused on exactly what the task is and what the goal is at hand.
You have an example of a time where you were maybe not as disciplined as you could have been, and can you maybe bring us through a touch of that story and how that impacted you and what you might have done differently?
Well, I think, it's a great question. I think one of the, as you go through different phases of your life, and as being an entrepreneur, and then having been, as an entrepreneur, having one of my companies bought by a larger company, you get caught into the bureaucracy of a corporate world, and whether it's from, non-competes or contractual obligations that you're involved in, you try to keep on growing your business, your vertical inside of a bigger enterprise. You lose control over your day-to-day. And one of the things, when I semi-retired and started, doing a lot more stuff on my own again, esports being one, the one thing that I've learned is how important it is to take control of your day, and not let other people dictate your day. Meaning, and that goes from like what time you get up in the morning to when you work out to, what you do first thing in the morning. I used to check emails in the morning and see what's going on and check the world out. And now I realize that by doing that, I don't do that anymore. Now I spend the first half an hour or hour of my day really planning out my day from things that happened in the previous day, or that I know that I had on my calendar for the week. When you're answering emails or reflecting on other people's emails, you're letting them dictate your day and your schedule and your thought process. And so for me, it's very important to start my day off on, and this is something, again, I've learned over the years, of not letting other people dictate how I'm going to think about the day or deal with the day. I still have to have a game plan. It's like, a coach for a professional sports team. You have a game plan. It doesn't mean you don't deviate it from it, and adapt from time to time, but you really have to go into every day with your own game plan.
Murphy, one of the things that you mentioned earlier was focus was one of the biggest things that, as you learned going through your career, was very important to you. But one of the things that I think is extremely special with yourself as well is not only did you move to an industry that you saw your kids being passionate about, you actually got involved in the industry with your kids.
Yeah.
And there's something very fascinating about that, which is not only are you mentoring them along the process, you're also creating a legacy with your family in terms of being in business with them and spending a lot of time with them and leaving them something as well that they continue to be entrepreneurial with. And talk to us as entrepreneurs in terms of the value of, instead of going to work 100 hours a week, and something down in the basement and coming up for dinner, the time you're spending with your family and how much value that brings to you.
Well, John, it's a double-edged sword sometimes. It's fantastic. And I love working with my son and the team that we've developed. We have both sons, sorry. We have an incredible team. I think the hardest thing to do is to divide and conquer, and each of us is good at different things, and we have to make sure that we stay in our lanes. Coming with that though also is the issue, dealing with family, that the day never ends. It's not 100 hours a day, it's 24/7. It's the dinner table. And unfortunately the whole family gets dragged in with it sometimes. And, little sister who doesn't care about esports all of a sudden has to listen to those conversations at the dinner table. But, being a mentor and being kind of a player coach has been really fun for me and rewarding for me, because I get to help with direction, but let these guys really take their passion and run with it day to day, and take their creativity day to day. Let's be real. It's a young person's industry, and they don't need to be the whole passion and vision doesn't have to be dictated, by an old entrepreneur.
Sure. So where is this whole industry going? What do you see over the next 5 to 10 years relative to where maybe other countries are in this industry? Where do you see the path is, and where are we going with esports?
Well, if you look at the major leagues, if you look at, going back to what the Crafts and the Wilpons, and the Cronkies, they invested in their, these pro level teams, which is Overwatch, League of Legends. It's most, a predominant, most of the players are Southeast Asian, and more specifically, a lot of them are South Korean. It's because it's been ingrained in their fabric as a society that this, that esports is almost their national sport, if you will. And we haven't gotten there as a culture yet in the U.S. I believe that we will be there in probably 10 to 12 years. I think along the way we'll evolve differently. Our cultures are different, our spacing, our values are different. But I think when people look at how the New York Yankees play the Boston Red Sox, and how Babe Ruth was a hometown product, and you look at the same thing with how football teams were, or look at the the original NHL teams. They were all homegrown local kids. That's not happening in esports. They're mercenaries right now, being hired away from other places. And we believe that the fabric and the culture for fans to really become to identify gamers, to identify as fans, and esports team enthusiasts, they really have to identify with the players. And a lot of times that's going to come from an academy system. It's going to come from local players that rise up the level from single A to double A to triple A to the major leagues, using a baseball analogy.
Murphy, we all know as a business owner, in order to get our unfair share of market share in our space, we have to have a differentiator. And that's what allows us to not just split the pie evenly with our competitors. I'm curious, what is your differentiator versus other esports competitors you have? And how did you go about selecting that as a differentiator?
Well, I think, it's a great question. I think the differentiating factor for us is the size of our facilities. There's currently hundreds, if not 1,000 gaming centers in the U.S., but the average size of one of these LAN centers is about 26 stations. We wanted to have a much different experience. We didn't want a dank, dungy, X internet cafe as our model. We want to have something that is sleek, that is much larger, typically around 100 stations, that has food and beverage, that have liquor licenses, that have, separate room for birthday parties and private events. We kind of look at it at, what Topgolf did for driving ranges, which is, not exactly a glamorous industry. But Topgolf created an incredible experience around being at their locations. And what our team has done, I think, and what's a differentiating factor for us is the experiential part of what we do at our centers. And it's from socialization to, again, the food and beverage, to the types of machines, to the atmosphere, et cetera. And I think that ultimately, like you have in Southeast Asia, where you have thousands and thousands of these types of gaming centers, and they become commoditized. We don't believe that experience will ever be commoditized.
Yeah. Murphy, I think one of the opportunities that I'd like to explore further when you talk about where it's going over the next 10 to 20 years, and combined with Rich's question about differentiation, is where esports is meeting education, number one. And then number two, you talked about the Helix Esports Academy and the value of potentially getting more infused with the young population in terms of, hey, this is a game you can play in your basement, or this is a game you can actually use to learn life lessons, help propel you to higher levels of education and careers. Talk to us a little bit about the Helix Esports Academy and how education and esports are also colliding.
Yeah, so the Helix Esports Academy was actually something that evolved out of some of the programming that we were doing. And then, John, it's through people like yourselves that, we're going to take it to the next level with, but effectively, as a business owner, when I look at the investment that we've made in the centers, at all of our centers, and we're open from, let's say, 2:00 in the afternoon till midnight on average on any given day. That means that from midnight until 2 p.m. the next day, all of our equipment, which is a significant investment in hardware and physical plant, is not being utilized. So as a business person, I just wanted to make sure that we were getting maximum utilization out of our investment. And when we started looking at some of the simple pieces around that, education came up again and again and again. And so we made an investment in a esports education company that had curriculum that was, based on state education requirements for, science, math, public speaking, different 21st century skills. And they had kind of gamified that curriculum. And we found that very interesting because we feel like that's just a trend that's going to happen in our society, is kids learn differently, but they game more, and how gaming is affecting how their learning habits. And so we also believe that it makes learning a little bit more fun, and they don't even realize that they're learning certain things while they're playing certain games. So that was part of the genesis of it. And then as we got more mature in the process, we did some pilot programs for the state of New Jersey, started working with some some colleges. There's hundreds of colleges today that are giving esports scholarships, and we have been approached by them as a recruiting mechanism, but also we saw the skills that they were looking for were STEM related. Those are the kind of players and students they were looking for. So we felt that we could use our locations as as a magnet for both. Now, for the academy specifically, it's a natural progression of intertwining esports with traditional sports, whether it be hockey at first or soccer. The soccer academy models where you are bringing kids together that that are like-minded, that enjoy playing esports, that might not be the best. They might not be 6'10" and a great 3-point shooter, or 6'2", 200, and skate like the wind. They're just a different skill set. The greatest thing about it, though, is that we believe that that esports is the great equalizer in regards to gender, race, religion. It doesn't care about your politics. It doesn't care where you're from. It's basically the best person with a certain demonstrable skill set is going to succeed. And that to me, now as the old guy, in the room and on my team is I look at some of the inequalities in our society today. I look at esports as the great equalizer. And so what we're trying to do is, and I use this term, I don't use this term lightly, is creating equitable access for all gamers to learn and play on the same platform, and then truly let the best skilled person, male, female, whatever, let them succeed and let their skills really come to the top.
You mentioned a minute ago or so, maximum utilization. I think that's an important concept for business owners and entrepreneurs to grab onto. What are some of the things, as some of the listeners hear maximum utilization, they go, ooh, I want that. What should someone consider when they're looking at what they currently have and how to move that to maximum utilization and what you learned in doing that?
Well, I think that, I think you have to understand your industry. You have to understand what the net impact is of trying to do different things. You have to understand who your partners are and who the other stakeholders are. And, I think you have to take some risks and try different things. If you're, our business model in the US, for example, utilization at the average facility, in terms of number of days open, number of machines that you have, number of stations, number of hours in a day that you're open, you have to figure out how you can maximize that. In our industry, it's probably in the mid-teens, low to mid-teens for total utilization. But in other parts of the world, like Europe, they're in the high 20% utilization, and in parts of Asia, they're north of 60% utilization. So how do you get that there? Some of them are just natural consequences of consumer behavior. Some of them you can redirect on your own and create partnerships but at the end of the day, it's your gut. Some of it's your gut, and some of it's your intuition, and some of it's just trying and failing. It's kind of saying, hey, I think this is going to work, and you have to look at the risk reward about what it's going to, if you're going to change a little bit a certain part of your business model, how much time is that going to take, how much money is that going to take, but is the reward there? And I think, coming from the investment management business, you always have to learn how to cut your losses when you're not right, when you don't see it working. Doesn't mean completely give up, but if the market's telling you something that, even if you don't believe in it, sometimes you have to listen to the market. Doesn't mean you just quit altogether. You just may have to kind of come at it from a different angle. But I think you have to sometimes, you have to cut your losses. Take risks, but know when to cut your losses.
Also, Murphy, I think when you talk about max utilization, there's a lot of things that entrepreneurs or people, I'd say, between the ages of maybe 35 to 55 don't quite fully grasp yet. And I'm putting myself right in that bucket, right? Everybody loves artificial intelligence, but they're not really sure how it's going to help their business or what it's going to do. A lot of people understand esports, not really sure where it's going or what, I thought that was video games. They don't really quite understand it. But there's another component that you guys are really investigating with your, equipment and max utilization is crypto mining. Can you talk to us a little bit about that? Because I think it's completely fascinating when you told me the story about, somebody may not be sitting there playing on this computer, but this computer is actually working at the same time. Can you talk to us a little bit more about what crypto mining is and in general and how that works?
Yeah. So, I years ago, coming from the investment management business, I thought the whole crypto world was fake and unsustainable at the levels that it was going at. And yet, when prices came down significantly, and then we started making these investments in these computers, and even if we were if we close at midnight, and even if we were doing STEM programming at, and with education stuff at 8 o'clock in the morning, we still had an 8-hour window with some significant technology that was not being utilized. So it just made sense that we would do this. And, one piece of advice on this note that I would, when you're looking at just thinking outside of the box, it's, you want to use technology to help you succeed. Don't rely on it to succeed. And, I think one of the things that we have on our team, and it's one piece of advice that I'd give any young entrepreneur, is don't hire a lot of people like yourself. Don't hire them, oh, they remind me so much of me. I'm going to hire that person. A lot of times it's you want people who think differently, who come up with different ideas, who will give you different points of perspective. And in that vein, you want to use their talents to make life easier for you. Back to the crypto, you want to use technology to make life easier for you and utilize. So, we had some people on our team that had recognized the opportunity and said, hey, some of these currencies have moved back to a level of profitability that we can mine and do this. And so we use some of our data analytics talents and tools to then create some automatic processes that now allow us to do it when the machine shuts off, even during the day. If someone's not using it, it's mining, and it knows where the price of the currency is, whether it be Bitcoin or Ethereum or the like, to what our electricity costs are versus what the wear and tear on the PCs are. And, again, it's just having somebody on your team understand what moves the needle here, and what are the impact, what were the major impacts on that business line.
You said don't hire people like yourself. I'm curious, in your selection process of hiring people, do you have a particular assessment that you rely on to determine if they're not like you? Or is it like, how do you go about going, yep, this person isn't like me, but that's okay, that's going to be a value, and I have a vision for how that plays? Like, how does that all work out?
Well, so that's again, this is one of the things I think you learn as you get older. When I was younger, I would have hired people just like me because I feel like they're trainable and they'll think like me and they'll behave like me. I can train them.
And they're good looking and they're smart.
Yeah,
and
right. Jesse Itzler, who's a famous entrepreneur, had a really interesting comment in one of his speeches or articles that I read. And it's basically, and I didn't read this until I got older in life. It's basically, hire people to make your life easier, and hire people for a very specific job. And when you look at hiring someone like yourself, you have to ask yourself, would I be happy doing that job? And a lot of times the answer is no. And so if you wouldn't do it and you think that person's is like you and reminds you of yourself from personal characteristics or personality characteristics, what makes you think that they're going to like doing that job? And if they don't like doing that job, they're probably not going to do it well. So I think it's really important to hire people for a very specific function and know what that job description is. And again, we don't get it right all the time, but when we hire somebody now, it's not, hey, that person shares our values and will be, just like we are. It's actually to the contrary. We're hiring people that are very, very different than I would be or my sons would be. And I think that's been a great compliment because they have a different skill set. They bring a lot more to the table, and they do the job that they were hired to do, and they are making life easier for everybody else. And I think that's a really important thing is you hire people to make your life easier. And if you're hiring somebody that's not making your life easier or work easier, you've got to make a change.
Yeah. So Rich, one of the things that Murphy and I were talking about prior to this call, and I've learned about over the past year or so, and it fascinated me, was where higher education is going, right? And where higher education is going is how can we bring in students that are proficient in artificial intelligence, virtual reality, crypto mining, engineering, software design, programming. I can go on and on and on and on. And where the majority of that population exists that is learning about technology and how to use technology are really the same audience and population that is attracted to esports and e-gaming. And so, you know, I think there's about 150 or 170 colleges right now in the US that provide really strong scholarships to bring that level of student into their educational platform. So then where do you go to high school? So now high schools are looking at that going, okay, we got to do more coding. We got to gamify everything that's going on. And that's, I think, the genesis of where Helix Esports Academy is going is we want to go to parents who are maybe frustrated that their kid's playing Fortnite for 8 hours a day and say, hey, don't get frustrated by that. Let's empower that. Let's empower that love of technology, but also provide the education that's going along with it. So I've been really fascinated about where education is going, and it's changed my psyche as a parent who's getting mad that my kid's playing, you know, 8 hours of video games, and thinking more about, okay, how can now he take that energy and put it into maybe a club where he's getting coached and developed, not only on how to be proficient at that game, but all the skills and what the industry can provide. And I can go even deeper to that. Murphy, you know, you think about the U.S. military and they're flying drones. Do they want like a former football player controlling the drones, or they want the, you know, the pro esports player who can make a split-second decision with a joystick on what to do? And it's just very fascinating to me where this is all going.
No, John, you're absolutely right. And I sat on a panel with General Muth, who's in charge of charge of recruiting for the U.S. Army. And interesting enough, Army Esports actually falls under his chain of command. And the amount of recruiting they do around esports today is really significant, and their success rate with those candidates is much higher than an average person who's enlisting. So no, it's having very real impact on how people work, and you know, the really interesting thing of what other people are doing in the industry, and I don't think the general public really knows this, is even Epic, you know, who's the publisher of Fortnite, has created the foundation of the language of which that Fortnite was written on was the Unreal Engine. And the Epic has taken the Unreal Engine and basically released it for free to the world for people just to create, and I use free loosely, but they've, you know, released it free to the world to have people create other platforms on top of their platform. So you have live CGI, you have AI, you have different learning platforms, you know, virtual reality platforms that are all being built around the Unreal Engine, which just happened to be what Fortnite was built on, and it will become a significant learning platform in the future, just because people understand it and it's so easy to use. It's not like you've got to go, you know, be a computer science major at a significant university. You can actually learn it by playing games, and then, you know, and then watching a couple of YouTube videos, and I'm not exaggerating.
Murphy, what's something that you've learned recently as it relates to being a business owner that really gives you a lot of energy, that you're excited to put to use in the near future, and it's something you've learned relatively recently?
Oof, that's a great question. I think it would have to be, it would fall into the category of what's happening with the Unreal Engine and seeing its applications. One of them, you know, as John was talking at the beginning of this broadcast, with live CGI. We have an investment in a company that creates studios, avatars, creates worlds where it's like, I don't know if you've seen the movie Ready Player One. It's a Steven Spielberg movie that is really a must watch for anybody getting into the esports world. But it basically is Ready Player One brought to life today. And watching what these guys do and all the applications, it's really, it just blows your mind. what costs are for, you know, you look at Iron Man and all the CGI that cost hundreds of millions, or, you know, the movie Avatar that cost billions of dollars to make, is now, you know, motion capture suits, which were $40,000-$50,000 just 2 or 3 years ago, are now, you know, less than $1,000, and they can do about 90% of what these old, this older technology could do. So to me, it just blows my mind. You see the democratization, and as people get access to this technology, what they can do with it. And it's just incredible and a lot of fun to watch, but it's mind blowing. And so, you know, the live CGI piece of this, or CGI in general, I think is going to have a significant place in the industry going forward.
Murphy, I don't want to sound like COVID has had an impact on my well-being here by asking this question, but I have heard or read a few articles that ultimately we're going to live in these worlds, these virtual reality worlds, to go do our shopping, to go do whatever. Is that realistic? Is that ultimately where we're going?
Well, again, if you look at, again, you really have to see the movie Ready Player One. It's first of all, it's a good movie. Not going to win any Academy Awards, but it's a very entertaining movie. This is the place where people are going to live, and the great thing about it is people get to choose who they want to be, not who they are. And while that, you know, that might sound a little bit strange, there takes away all the institutional impact of you know, race, gender, politics. Basically, you create the person that you want to be, where you want to be, and how you want people to perceive you. And in education, I find it fascinating because, you know, I think there's a lot of institutional biases that get in the way of learning. For example, and I'm saying this, you know, this was a story given to me, or it was a scenario given to me by someone in the New Jersey Department of Education. How much credibility does a 55-year-old white guy have in a second grade class in the inner city where 80% of the kids are Hispanic and the other 20% are African American? Probably not a lot. And yet, through an avatar, you could actually teach those same kids in a gaming learning environment where they're not threatened. They don't feel like they're being talked down to. They feel like they're being immersed, and they have something they can identify with that person. And therefore learning takes on a completely different tenor. And I think that's kind of, you know, one of the opportunities here. You know, there is some fantasy, unreal, you know, feel about it, but I feel, you know, but there are some practical applications that could be very, very powerful.
You know, the world, I find, is changing very quick. I think COVID may have accelerated a lot of things, whether it be education or esports or just business in general and how we conduct things. And a lot of entrepreneurs or people that have been working as an entrepreneur within a company are looking to maybe change career paths or look at something new. And as you look out on the horizon, all of these things we've been talking about today, you know, really is the future of where the world is going here. How would one go about learning more about not just esports, but if they had a passion for AI, or they had a passion for virtual reality or crypto mining or whatever it may be? I mean, it's a big step to take to change your career path in medical device sales or in insurance or whatever, and take a leap of faith here. But how would you go about the educational process? Are there books you should be reading, or conferences you should be attending, or just some sites on the web and do research? Or certainly they're going to listen to the movie after this plug. But what are the things you'd recommend?
One of my partners, who I think is one of the smartest guys in esports, has written this book called The Book of Esports. It was just released a couple of weeks ago. Not to plug it too much, but it's a great place to start because it'll give you a very good foundational understanding, educational foundational understanding of the esports industry and what makes certain things tick. I think podcasts like this, I think listening to industry podcasts are really important because you're going to start hearing people's opinions that really might strike something. The internet's so, I hate to use this word, the internet's so littered with bad opinions and one-off articles. You don't know how people are biased. I think listening and learning is the most important thing. Virtual conferences, going to conferences when they're back in person, I think are really important part of the learning process. But I think listening to people who succeed is the most important part of this. And you just have to sift through a lot of the noise and figure out who are the right people to listen to. And that's sometimes very hard to do for some people. And for some people, it's really easy to do.
You said listening to people who succeed or learning from them. Can you tell us, what do you attribute your success to?
Hard work. I mean, just putting in the time, putting in the hours, being relentless, knowing when to pivot, knowing when to redirect, but just, you have to have a vision and an idea, and you got to go for it. And then you really just got to put the work behind it. It can't be a hobby. If it is, then you're probably doing the wrong thing. And not everyone gets that opportunity. And obviously it's harder to do later in life, but for a younger person, especially in a day of age today where there's so much adversity in the workforce, there's, if you have a good idea, you just got to figure out how to bootstrap it together and then put it together and then just work hard at it. And someone's going to take notice. If it's a good idea and a good concept, somebody will take notice.
Awesome. Murphy, I'm excited to work with you on the Helix Esports Academy model that we've been talking about. I believe we have a launch date of October 1st. We're going to launch our first center in Exeter, New Hampshire. Can you tell us in closing a little bit more about why you, Jack, and Murphy Jr. are excited about this Helix Esports Academy model, in partnership with Helix Esports?
Well, I think it's the embodiment of a lot of the values that we have as a family, but also as importantly as a company in our mission. And it's to, our moniker is kind of esports for everyone, and we're trying to bring the entertainment factor of esports into every community, because it doesn't really exist here in the U.S. like it does in other parts of the world, but also the educational component, and really blend the two together, and give every kid an opportunity to use this equipment, to be in this environment, to succeed. And that is fundamental to what our mission statement is. And the Academy piece of this, as we try to help kids develop and progress, just like, John, you've done this for hockey and soccer. We believe in that model, and it has not been done here in the U.S. And if it's been done, it's not been done well or on scale. And we feel there's a huge opportunity to go into these communities with smaller footprints, to feed into these larger hubs of Helix Esports centers that we have, to create tournaments and events and camaraderie and a sense of belonging in the esports community.
Awesome. Well, thanks a lot for your time today, Murphy. I thoroughly enjoyed the conversation. I need to read a book. I need to watch a movie. I had a lot of homework to do. I encourage anybody listening to this as well. Getting up to speed on what's going on out there in all these different segments we talked about today is a huge sharpening of the saw moment for everybody. So hopefully, Rich, you grab some stuff from this as well. And
absolutely,
look forward to digging into some of this stuff. So thanks a lot for your time, Murphy.
Thanks.
All right. Thanks, guys. Have a great day.